The content of this recording is not intended to be legal advice or therapeutic advice. It's for informational purposes only. Please consult an attorney in your jurisdiction or a licensed therapist. Have you been ordered to participate in co-parenting therapy, or are you considering requesting it? And what is it? Well, the goal is to actually smooth out the conflict between the two parents. They get together with a licensed therapist, they listen to issues in the family, and they hopefully come up with ways of working better together. In my experience, this works in normal circumstances, but in high conflict situations, it frequently is a power and control issue and is not productive and can actually be traumatizing to the targeted parent of the alienation or hostilities. So, why should you not use your child's therapist for this court ordered co parenting? It seems logical. They already know about the family, that they would be a likely person to be able to help you. Well, here's why. When there is joint legal custody, each parent must approve and sign the paperwork for a child to be in therapy. And if you have a high conflict or alienating parent, they're not getting their way. They're going to want to fire the therapist. And if they fire the therapist for the co parenting, they're actually going to terminate your child's therapeutic relationship also. And the goal here is to smooth things out and to advocate for the child. So the best way for us to understand this would be to actually just look at an example. And I do have to give a trigger warning here because there is mention of domestic violence. So if that is a trigger for you, please just stop the recording and don't listen to this episode. Let's look at Carmen. She reported extreme emotional abuse, financial abuse, and domestic violence. And she went through a full custody evaluation and felt that no one really believed her or grasped what was going on, and felt it was unreasonable with the history of domestic violence to have to do the co-parenting. But because she was court ordered to do so, she attended a few sessions. And during her fourth co-parenting session, she was with the therapist, which was actually the child's therapist also, and the ex-spouse. And she listened to him complain and rail off a bunch of name calling and beefs about her for about 5 minutes. And then hostile ex finally said, "And you falsely accused me of domestic violence." In which case she stood up and pointed to all the places where she had been punched. And she said, "You committed domestic violence. You punched me here and here and here. And you beat the out of me." And hostile ex replied, "If I beat the out of you, they'll be carrying you out on a stretcher." And then he said, "In 5 years, child will have nothing to do with you. They'll have gone to court and they'll be living with me." At the advice of Carmen's therapist, she terminated the co-parenting therapy. The therapist recommended that she never participate in this again, and it did present a trauma and some additional efforts that she had to put in healing, going through the trauma of being talked to this way. But it was even more distressing to her that the therapist did and said nothing about the inappropriateness of the threats and the intention to emotionally take the child away from her. And this kind of stuff happens all the time. And I'm sorry to say that, she had a very difficult time with it. She could not have foreseen that the therapist would not stand up against such outrageous behavior because she had no idea that the therapist would get fired by the other hostile parent if they were to stand up and correct those behaviors. I appreciate that therapy is expensive and you're paying for your child's therapist, your therapist, and then you get to pay for co parenting therapy. And this isn't an option for a lot of people. It's an extreme luxury to be able to afford therapy. So let's make it the best case scenario possible. Do not use your child's therapist. So, the takeaway from this is that if you do have to do co parenting therapy with your former spouse or partner, that it is an independent, neutral therapist that is not treating anybody else in the family, and that there are strict guidelines on what can happen during these sessions, how many have to be performed, and the cost sharing expenses of them. If you found this recording valuable, please share it with anyone you believe will benefit from it. Subscribe and help promote the work that we're doing on this channel.